Ready, because today we're gonna really challenge some assumptions, I think. We're diving deep into Jewish migrations to Europe during the Middle Ages. And, you probably think it was all forced exile, right?
Yeah, that's what a lot of people assume.
But it's way more complicated than that. We're going way beyond that simple story. We've got these excerpts from academic articles about these communities, and they paint a way, way richer picture.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. We're going to see a much more complex story. Think economics, social dynamics, even invitations from Christian rulers.
Exactly. Invitations from Christian rulers.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay, that's wild. And just to really blow your mind, get this. In 2010, Europe still had 10% of the global Jewish population.
Wow, that's a huge number after centuries of, all the stuff they went through.
I know, right? It's incredible. So how did they not only survive, but sometimes really thrive in this really complex environment?
Well, first, it really speaks to just their resilience and the really interesting ways they became part of European society. But to really get it, we got to remember there were two main branches of European Jewry that kind of developed. Ashkenazi in Central Europe and Sephardic in Southern Europe.
Right, right. And each had their own distinct traditions and cultures.
Exactly.
The Ashkenazi Jews spoke Yiddish and the Sephardic Jews had Ladino. Amazing how these unique elements emerged from a shared, heritage.
Absolutely. And while there were some Jewish settlements during the Roman Empire, it was really around the 8th to 10th centuries when the larger migration started happening. And that's what really shaped, European Jewry as we know it.
Okay. So are we ready for this? Charlemagne.
Oh, yeah. Here we go.
A powerful Christian ruler, right?
Yeah.
He actually invited Jewish traders to settle in his empire.
I know, right? It's pretty surprising when you first hear it.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Uh-huh.
What was his angle?
Yeah, he was definitely not just being nice. I mean, he was a really smart, shrewd ruler, and he knew that Jewish merchants and artisans would be really good for his empire. They were skilled, right, in trade and crafts.
Yeah.
And that was, crucial for boosting the medieval economy.
So it was all about, boosting the economy and not really about tolerance.
Yeah, it was a practical decision. And this is where we get to this super interesting concept. It's called servi camerae, meaning servants of the chamber.
Okay. Now we're talking servants of the chamber. That sounds kind of mysterious.
Well, it meant that Jews were basically under the ruler's protection, almost like property, you could say.
Wow, really?
Yeah, but in exchange, they got some protection and they got some legal independence. So it was like an agreement.
Kind of a trade-off.
Yeah, exactly, a trade-off. One example is this charter from Speyer in 1084, which guaranteed the Jewish community safety and the right to trade.
So a mix of dependence and opportunity.
Right. And this wasn't just a one-time thing either. There were similar charters granted in lots of different places.
Oh, so it was like a common thing.
Yeah, which just shows how complex and sometimes, precarious their legal standing was in Europe back then. I mean, they were valuable to the economy.
Yep.
But also very vulnerable to being taken advantage of.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. So speaking of their, economic skills, let's get into the Radhanite network.
Okay. This is a really interesting one.
I mean, think about this. These Jewish merchants actually ran a trade route that went all the way from Europe to Asia and Africa. Spices, silks.
This is a huge network.
It's mind-blowing. But they also traded slaves, and that's obviously, a really dark part of the story. How do we even think about that?
Right. Yeah. It's complicated. We can't deny, the part they played in connecting these different parts of the world and exchanging goods and spreading knowledge. But yeah, the slave trade is a tough thing to reconcile. And this economic power that they had, this influence, it led them to become really big in money lending, which a lot of times Christians weren't allowed to do because of, religious reasons.
Right. There's that story about Aaron of Lincoln in England.
Right.
Made a fortune financing everything, abbeys, castles, even royal projects.
Yeah, Aaron of Lincoln is a great example. Lots of medieval rulers really relied on Jewish financiers.
I bet they did.
Yeah, as European economies grew, Jewish financiers became more and more important. But unfortunately, even though it was a necessary role, they got a lot of criticism. People accused them of being unfair. And sadly, this is kind of where some of the anti-Jewish sentiment that would get much worse later, this is where it started.
Yeah, it's you can see those early warning signs.
Exactly. And sadly, things would take a very dark turn in the coming centuries. While there were times of acceptance and even prosperity, the medieval period was also a time of really terrible persecution and violence against these Jewish communities.
It's hard to grasp, the level of violence they went through, like the massacres during the Crusades, just horrifying. Over 12,000 Jews in the Rhineland, just in the First Crusades. And then you have the Black Death.
Oh, the Black Death was just devastating. I mean, for everyone.
Right, of course.
But for Jews, it was, I mean, were scapegoated,
right,
blamed for spreading the plague, which is just, completely false.
right.
But it led to even more violence and people being driven from their homes. It's a scary reminder of how fast fear turns into prejudice and how deadly that can be.
Absolutely. And then, we can't forget those mass expulsions. England, 1290, expels all Jews. France, 1394, same thing. Over 100,000 Jews forced to leave. It's mind-boggling, the scale of it all.
It's huge. And it shows you how vulnerable minority populations can be, even when they're essential to society, which the Jews were. I mean, it makes you wonder, how do we stop that from happening? How do we break the cycle?
Yeah. It's a question that we're still struggling with. It's hard not to see, when you think about these expulsions from centuries ago, it's hard not to see how they kind of foreshadow what happened with the Nazis.
Well,
The ghettos.
absolutely.
Right.
It's that same pattern of persecution that unfortunately keeps repeating through history. Anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is something that's been incredibly persistent.
It is. It's a really sobering thought. But, even with all this darkness, there were still these bright spots, these incredible achievements. We can't forget about the Jewish scholars and all they accomplished during this time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Despite facing these huge, huge challenges, they produced some really groundbreaking work in scholarship and literature, really profound influence on both Jewish and Christian thought.
It's true. I mean, just think about Rashi. His commentaries on the Torah are still studied today.
I know.
Or Maimonides, his philosophical work had such a huge impact, and not just on Jewish scholars, on Christian scholars too, for generations.
Absolutely. His work crossed those boundaries, a real lasting legacy.
And it wasn't just, within their own communities that they were making an impact. I mean, Jews also played a huge role in translating all those Arabic medical texts into Latin.
Oh, that's right.
Which was really important for, medical knowledge in Europe.
Absolutely. They were bridging these huge cultural and intellectual divides, even when they were being marginalized in those same societies.
Yeah.
It's really a testament to the power of knowledge
Yeah.
and human ingenuity to overcome, those obstacles. And there's actually another aspect to this cultural exchange that I think is just so fascinating.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism.
Right.
Well, it had a big influence on Christian mystics during the same period.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Or think about food, new culinary techniques, new spices, introduced by Jewish communities.
That's interesting.
That seem like little things, maybe, but they tell a bigger story about how cultures were interacting and influencing each other.
Yeah, like these little threads woven into the fabric of European society.
Exactly. And speaking of changes, we have to talk about that eastward migration of Jews to Poland-Lithuania. That happened in the late Middle Ages. What caused that?
Right, good point.
Well, with all the persecution going on in Western Europe, a lot of Jews looked east for safety and opportunity. And Poland-Lithuania was more tolerant at the time, offered more chances economically. So it attracted a lot of Jewish migrants from all over.
So it was like the center of Jewish life was shifting a little.
Yeah, you could say that.
And thinking about, the tragic things that would happen in the 20th century, it's incredible to see how impactful that migration would be.
Oh, yeah, those communities in Eastern Europe, they really flourished.
They did. And it's amazing, right? I mean, they faced such incredible hardship. But they didn't just survive, they adapted. They innovated. They created these vibrant communities.
It's true. It's a really powerful testament to how resilient they were.
Yeah.
And how adaptable.
It really is. Just this amazing story of resilience and the human spirit,
Absolutely. I mean, it reminds us that even in the face of terrible things, people can still achieve so much. They can still contribute so much to the world, leave a real impact. I think it's a really hopeful message. But also like a call to action, We have to fight prejudice and discrimination. wherever we see it.
It's really amazing when you think about how this like medieval story connects to what's happening today. France. It actually has the largest Jewish community in Europe today.
Wow, I didn't realize that.
It's true, and it's like a direct line back to those early migrations, the ones we were just talking about. It really makes you see how deep those roots go.
Yeah, it really does. It shows how, how strong that legacy is
Yeah.
from those migrations and how connected, I mean, how deeply connected Jewish communities are to Europe, even with, centuries of upheaval and displacement. They rebuilt and they thrived. It's really incredible.
It really is. I mean, it's a testament to how resilient they are, that's for sure. And it's important to remember, like, these stories, they aren't just, ancient history. They really impact how we understand, like, things today. Identity, belonging, and unfortunately anti-Semitism, it's still a problem in the world today.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. That's a really, really crucial point. What Jewish communities went through, throughout history, especially during the medieval period, it informs how we talk about these issues today. Prejudice, discrimination, the fight for equality, those echoes from the past, they're still relevant.
It's like they echo through time, reminding us that the fight for justice and understanding, it's not over. There's still work to do, and we can learn so much, I think, from these stories.
Absolutely. I mean, by exploring these narratives, we get a much deeper understanding, not just of the past, but also of what we're facing today, the challenges we have in building a world that's more inclusive, more equitable.
Yeah. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Jewish migrations in medieval Europe, I just have this feeling of awe, at how resilient and adaptable these communities were. I mean, they went through some truly awful things, but they left this lasting impact on European culture, on society, on intellectual life.
It's true. Their story is so powerful. It shows how strong the human spirit can be, how it can persevere, how it can innovate, how it can contribute to the richness and diversity of the world. I think it's a story that we really need to remember and reflect on.
Yeah. It really leaves us with some big questions to think about, I think. Like how can we make sure that the lessons from history, the good and the bad, that we use them in our own lives and our decisions today? How do we create societies where being different is celebrated, where all communities can really thrive? It's something that we all need to grapple with.
Those are really important questions, and I hope this deep dive has given you the context, the historical insights that you need to take part in those conversations, to really participate in them.
Yeah.
Because understanding the past, it's crucial for building a better future.
I think it has. This has been a fascinating journey, really. And to all our listeners out there, I really encourage you to keep learning about this, to go even deeper into this rich history, of Jewish communities, not just in Europe, but everywhere. There's always more to discover.
Because when we understand the past, we can do better in the present.
Yeah.
And we can work towards a future that's better, a future where tolerance and understanding and mutual respect, where those things are the norm, that's a future worth fighting for.